just incredible. And, brings into context our whole system of innocent until proven guilty. Why is he not being given bond? And, we could debate that all day long. Of all people that's unlikely to flee or get away, well, he's got the resources to flee, but he's so recognizable. And isn't he innocent until proven guilty? Well, yeah, but, we have to recognize there are degrees of innocent until proven guilty.
The release of The Reckoning, a 4-part Netflix documentary produced under 50 Cent's banner, sparked one of the largest media storms the entertainment world had seen in years. Dropping on December 2nd, the project instantly became a cultural flashpoint, blending archival material, dramatizations, publicly circulated allegations, and interviews that chronicled the decades of conversation surrounding Sean Diddy Combs. While the documentary itself did not claim to be a legal indictment, the way global audiences interpreted its presentation created shockwaves across social platforms. The rollout became an event, triggering viral reactions, long-form analysis videos, and round-the-clock commentary from creators tracking every new detail. Within 48 hours, hashtags tied to the documentary dominated trending lists, and clips pulled from the production circulated everywhere from TikTok to major news discussion panels. The story grew not because of any single claim, but because viewers believed they were witnessing the most comprehensive timeline of controversies ever assembled in one place. As the documentary gained traction, attorneys representing individuals connected to the broader discussion began reviewing the publicly available material presented in the series. The project's mixture of reenactments, archived interviews, publicly accessible documents, and social reactions created a layered narrative that many viewers interpreted as a roadmap to understanding the long-standing controversies surrounding Combs.
There is a criminal investigation underway, and that they believe that there would be evidence of crimes in one or both of these homes.
Now you got the Diddy situation where he jumps on a private jet, they say yesterday, and is on his way to the Cape Verde Islands.
Even though the documentary framed itself as commentary and analysis rather than a legal exposé, its structure and editing style amplified the emotional impact, making audiences everywhere feel as if they were watching the culmination of years of unresolved tension in the public conversation around one of the industry's most powerful figures. Internet discourse quickly transformed the documentary from entertainment into a cultural turning point, and interest in the real-life legal cases surged. By December 4th, creators online were posting breakdowns comparing parts of the documentary to publicly filed court documents, witness statements, and material that had circulated for years. Viewers examined timestamps, analyzed audio presented in the documentary, and surfed social media for any new pieces of information. At the same time, critics raised concerns about how the public was merging documentary storytelling with legal reality. But the genie was already out of the bottle. The Reckoning had become a worldwide phenomenon, interpreted by millions as the final puzzle piece in a story the public had attempted to understand for decades. On December 5th, reports began circulating that attorneys associated with various cases planned to file emergency petitions, requesting that the court review the documentary as supplemental public commentary relevant to ongoing proceedings. This move, uncommon and dramatic, sparked yet another wave of public discussion. By the morning of December 6th, news outlets had already positioned crews outside federal courthouses, unsure of what the day would bring.
I think in federal court and for these charges, they would say it's routine, but in the public realm, this is very significant, just from who we associate Diddy being and everything we've seen him do over the decades. Like you said, this is quite the downfall to go from, we saw the mansions back in March that were raided by the feds. So to go from living in those mansions to being in a jail cell right now, I think...
What began as a streaming release had escalated into a global media event, signaling that the documentary had become more than entertainment. It had become a cultural catalyst, reshaping the public conversation around Diddy's legacy and the broader discussions surrounding accountability in the entertainment industry. For many, this marked the moment where public storytelling collided directly with real-world legal pressure, setting the stage for an unprecedented day in court. Saturday, December 6th became one of the most surreal mornings in entertainment journalism. The courthouse, usually dormant on weekends, was suddenly surrounded by reporters, camera crews, legal analysts, and spectators trying to understand why an emergency session had been scheduled. Federal courts rarely open their doors on Saturdays, and the decision immediately signaled that something extraordinary had occurred behind the scenes. Outlets ran live tickers tracking every arrival. commentators speculated about what materials the judge had reviewed and how the documentary factored into the unfolding events. Meanwhile, social media platforms erupted with real-time updates, transforming the courthouse steps into the center of global attention. Inside the courthouse, prosecutors arrived carrying boxes of documents that they described only as newly compiled material. While none of these contents were made public, the symbolism alone amplified the story. Audiences believed they were witnessing the merging of a viral documentary with actual legal scrutiny.
The money that they're saying Diddy has to start paying this guy on October 1st, right. Diddy's team is like, hold on, we need an emergency conversation about why this should not have been granted. And they awarded him a TRO, which basically meant that Diddy's team was not allowed to sell any property in that state or anything related to what could be used to pay the plaintiff.
Legal experts appearing on live streams emphasized repeatedly that documentaries are not evidence and cannot replace verified filings, but they can raise questions that influence how attorneys organize and present existing material. As the morning continued, this nuance became lost in the frenzy, overshadowed by viral headlines proclaiming that the reckoning had forced the court's hand. The atmosphere intensified once marshals escorted Combs into the courtroom under heightened security. Analysts pointed out that this alone did not indicate guilt or innocence. Security protocols often shift in high-profile cases, but the public interpreted the images in dramatic fashion. Cassie's presence in the courtroom, seated quietly behind her legal team, added another layer of emotional resonance. For viewers following the saga online for years, the moment felt symbolic, even though legal processes require careful distinction between emotional impact and judicial procedure. At approximately 11 a.m., monitors inside the courtroom were activated, displaying selected segments from the reckoning. These selections, according to journalists present in the hallway, were chosen because they aligned with ongoing discussions in the case, not because the documentary itself served as evidence. Still, the visual of a judge reviewing portions of a Netflix production electrified the public narrative. It created a blurring between commentary, artistic representation, and judicial review, a rare intersection that fed the belief that this moment marked a turning point. Outside the courthouse, crowds swelled. Some spectators held signs supporting alleged victims. Others simply recorded the unfolding spectacle. News outlets aired footage of the courthouse exterior alongside clips from the documentary, creating an almost cinematic juxtaposition between real-world legal action and the dramatized narrative that had captured global attention. Every update, every headline, every social media rumor added to the intensity of the situation. By noon, the story had become one of the biggest live events on the internet, and as anticipation built, so did speculation about what the judge's final decision would mean, not only for Combs, but for public perception of documentary filmmaking's power in shaping cultural understanding.
We all saw it posted yesterday all over our social media pages. Cassie filed a lawsuit in New York City against Diddy.
Yikes.
She's claiming she was stuck in a decade-long cycle of abuse.
Inside the courtroom, the presentation of selected documentary segments was followed by hours of legal discussion. Attorneys emphasized repeatedly that the documentary itself did not function as direct evidence. Rather, it highlighted areas where existing public materials, long-standing allegations, and earlier investigations intersected. The courtroom atmosphere remained tense as each segment played, creating emotional weight for observers, even though legal standards demanded analytic distance. What resonated most strongly with spectators was the way the documentary arranged timelines, audio moments, and historical interviews into a cohesive narrative. Whether viewers agreed with its framing or not, the series had undeniably reignited public interest in the broader case. As clips continued playing, analysts later explained that the judge likely used the moment not to reconsider the entire case, but to evaluate whether any elements referenced in the documentary corresponded with materials already in the court's possession. Still, to those in attendance, it appeared as though the documentary was being scrutinized line by line. The atmosphere inside the courtroom reportedly grew more emotionally charged as pre-existing allegations were contextualized with new materials that prosecutors had compiled over the previous 2 days. For onlookers, the experience felt like watching a cultural phenomenon intersect with legal procedure in real time. Throughout the afternoon, reports filtered out that the judge questioned the timeline of events depicted in the documentary, the alignment between public testimony and official documents, and whether some of the newly submitted materials required separate hearings. These reports, while unconfirmed until transcripts are released, fueled social media commentary that the courtroom was witnessing a historic moment where media exposure influenced legal urgency. Many viewers interpreted these developments as evidence of overwhelming pressure building around the case, regardless of whether the documentary itself held legal weight. Meanwhile, commentators across news platforms highlighted a crucial element. Public opinion does not dictate sentencing, evidence does. Yet public pressure can sometimes accelerate procedural movement or lead attorneys to re-examine overlooked materials. In the case of The Reckoning, its explosive public reactions seem to coincide with renewed legal momentum, illustrating the modern reality that cultural narratives can influence the pace at which legal institutions respond. By late afternoon, spectators began sensing that the hearing was far more consequential than initially expected. Courtroom behavior suggested that the judge viewed the situation as serious enough to warrant immediate action, especially given the volume of materials presented. Analysts outside compared the scene to historic moments where cultural forces, investigative journalism, and legal systems collided in unexpected ways. When the judge finally returned with a ruling, the building fell silent. The decision, while described in dramatic fashion by online commentators, reflected the culmination of months of legal tension intensified by the documentary's release. Spectators outside learned of the outcome within seconds as reporters rushed out to broadcast the news, sparking one of the most extreme social media reactions seen in years. As the dust settled, the world entered a new phase of analysis, reflection, and speculation. Commentators began breaking down the entirety of The Reckoning scene by scene, not to determine guilt, but to understand why the documentary resonated so powerfully with global audiences. Viewers noted that the project did not rely solely on allegations. It relied on atmosphere, pacing, and narrative clarity. It organized years of publicly circulated information into an accessible format, which amplified its emotional impact. People who had followed these discussions for years felt a sense of closure in finally seeing the full timeline presented in one place. Others who were encountering the story for the first time were stunned by how large the narrative was. Legal analysts emphasized that while the documentary ignited public interest, judicial outcomes remain grounded in real evidence. Still, they acknowledged that the series likely contributed to an environment where attorneys expedited their filings, and where previously overlooked materials were brought forward. The cultural pressure alone made it impossible for the legal system to ignore the renewed scrutiny. In that sense, The Reckoning became an example of how media can influence urgency without dictating verdicts. The entertainment industry, meanwhile, began discussing what this moment meant for future documentaries. Producers started recognizing the immense responsibility that comes with presenting narratives built around sensitive topics. Networks acknowledged that audiences increasingly view documentaries as truth rather than interpretation, blurring important boundaries. This realization sparked debates about ethics, narrative framing, and the impact of streaming platforms on real-world legal processes. Public opinion surrounding Diddy also shifted dramatically. While many viewers approached the story with caution, acknowledging that documentaries can dramatize events, others embraced the narrative fully, interpreting the series as confirmation of long-discussed rumors. This divide highlighted the changing landscape of media literacy, where audiences often treat entertainment as evidence. Analysts expect future conversations about this case to serve as a major turning point in how people interpret documentary content. Ultimately, The Reckoning marked a point where storytelling, legal scrutiny, and cultural sentiment collided. The public watched as a streaming documentary became part of an international discussion, influencing perception and accelerating legal focus. The December 6th ruling, regardless of how each viewer interprets its connection to the documentary, became inseparable from the cultural moment that surrounded it. As coverage continues, one thing remains clear: this story will be analyzed for years, not only because of its legal significance, but because of what it reveals about the power of narrative in the digital era. Documentaries once seen as supplemental commentary now have the ability to reshape public consciousness almost instantaneously. If you found this breakdown informative and want more deep dive coverage into major cultural moments and media fallout, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more detailed analysis.